So I'm like, let me just go start buying my own listings. Took out a $60,000 second on my house, used hard money, and went down to the good old courthouse. Now, in Phoenix, different from California, you don't have to have the entire amount at sale like you do in California. In Phoenix, you just need $10,000 cashier's check to bid. So just like Phoenix, California, like a lot of places, if you bought 5 years ago, what's your house worth today? Like 400,000, right? So now you have a first lien for 200, you can probably get, a small business bank or something like that to give you your equity out as long as you got a good. So now you borrow maybe another 100,000 and you have $300,000 in debt on your $400,000 house. Well,
hey everybody, Jose Luis Morales here. Welcome back to another episode of the Morales Group Show. Today we have a very special guest. His name is Chris Eymann. He is based out of Arizona and Florida, and today he is going to be covering how to buy a house at auction. Now, I get this question a lot. A lot of people think that all of the good deals sell at auction, so I always get the question, how do I buy a property at auction? It's a little bit more complex than people imagine to buy a property at auction, which is one of the reasons why I have never bought a property at auction. But in this video, we're going to explain to you the whole process as to how to buy a property at auction, what systems you need to set up, who are the key players, and what you have to do it successfully. And who better than Chris Eymann, who's bought plenty of properties at auction. So Chris, for our viewers that don't know who you are, who is Chris Eymann? And then how did you get involved in real estate investing? And then maybe if you can talk a little bit about your buying properties at auction journey.
Yeah, so lived in Arizona. School, was an IT guy for multiple years and got laid off twice in the IT bust. Went agent route for just a minute, enough to get a listing and sell the listing and drive a buyer around for 4 to 5 weeks just to have them call on the week I was out of town and said, I drove by a house. I called the agent off the sign, you weren't in town, and I'm like, so spent 4 or 5 weeks driving this lady around and her kid around just to have her on the weekend I'm gone buy from somebody else. I'm like, I don't want to deal with buyers anymore. So I'm like, how do I create my own listings without having, because I don't feel like I'm very good at sales. So how do I create my own listings without having to go and sit at the kitchen table, right? So I'm like, let me just go start buying my own listings. Took out a $60,000 second on my house, used hard money, and went down to the good old courthouse. Now, in Phoenix, different from California, you don't have to have the entire amount at sale like you do in California. In Phoenix, you just need $10,000 cashier's check to bid. So little easier to get involved. Like you go buy in Texas, you actually have like 3 hours to pay. So you actually can go pay and then, go set up a hard money loan. California, Vegas done sales of both there. And it's just like, you have to have your cashier's checks all in play. So like if you're bidding, and especially if you're bidding on multiple houses, you got to have, denominations like 100,000, maybe you have like 500,000, and then you go to like 50,000 and you have like, another 250 in there. And then you go down to 20,000 and you go down to 5. Cause like once you give the trustee the money, he's going to return your money on the overage. But like, say you buy it for $266, you don't want to hand him $300,000 of cashier's checks because you're sitting around waiting a few weeks for your money to come back, right? And then you got to keep track of it and all that other stuff. So anyway, so I went down, got my $10,000 cashier's check, and started bidding at trustee sale in 1999.
I love it.
Just a few years ago.
What I picked up from that is that it's different in different states. And you're right. In California, I actually went to visit a auction in front of the courthouse, and I saw all the investors had envelopes of cashier's checks in different denominations. That way they can pay for the actual property. So let's start at the beginning. So before you get to the actual courthouse, like what type of research do you have to do on a property? And where do you find this research, and who can help people with this type of research as well too?
Yeah. So, if you're going to do the foreclosure business, you can actually do it in a two-step process, if you will. You can just go to like a foreclosure radar, for instance. It's just a data service. And they're just keeping track of the notices of trustee sale, which are just recorded at the courthouse. Now, yes, you can go to the courthouse and, research them yourself, but I'm not going to do the brain damage of, looking at the notices and filling out the spreadsheet. I think I want to say it's only $100 a month for foreclosure radar to be like, when did the notice come out? Let's go. So I actually in Phoenix do kind of a two-step process. I get the notice, and then I call, text, all that kind of stuff, because the notice date in Arizona is 90 days. It's a 90-day window, so they notice it and they can foreclose 90 days later. And it's Texas is 45 days. I actually don't know California statute, but once they notice it, there's a certain time frame they actually have to wait till the foreclosure sale.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And just so,
the notice has all the important information. It has Mr. and Mrs. Borrower, who the trustee is, because that's the person that's hired to sell the house, the address of the house, the original mortgage balance, when the mortgage was taken out. So it has all the information on the property and the mortgage and the mortgage company and all that stuff.
So what Chris is referring on Foreclosure Radar is a platform, right, that tracks all of the foreclosures, and it tells you where they're at in the process and when they're actually getting foreclosed on, basically. Now, I know people look on Zillow sometime and they say, oh, pre-foreclosure, or they think that they can just go bid on these properties without doing any additional research. What additional research do people have to do? Like, let's say somebody's getting foreclosed on next Friday. Can I just show up to the courthouse and basically bid on the property, or do I have to do any additional research on top of the information that I see on Foreclosure Radar?
Yeah, so step one is obviously to get the data. And let's just say we're going to go to the foreclosure on Monday, right? So each different trustee, that's the companies that are hired to sell the home, have different websites. A California trustee might be, we have Tiffany and Bosco in Arizona as our big trustee, but Recon Servicing Company is a big trustee in California. So you go to Recon Servicing website, and they'll say, everything is sold by a trustee sale number. So it's generally TS dash, so trustee sale number dash 1459. You go to their website and you put in TS dash 1459. And it has the same information. And it might, when you pull that up, it might say postponed from next Monday to 30 days from now. That could be because they're in a bankruptcy. They might have entered into a loan modification. The bank just might not be ready to actually sell the property. So there's lots of reasons why they postpone. But let's just say it's actually going to sale. It might say, hey, TS number 59, whatever, here's the address, and it's got an opening bid of 500,000, for instance. So that's what the trustee is going to start the bid on Monday for 123 Main Street.
Now, what I wanted to ask, is it common for sale dates to get postponed? And then what's some of the longest that you've seen it? Because I know people that are like, oh, I want to go bid on this property. They go, it gets postponed, then it gets postponed again. Then they end up going or having to do research all the time for one property. They got postponed 10, 15, 20 times.
Yeah. So I'd say 70 to 75% don't actually go to sale the first time up, right? They're just like, the people generally can go into a modification agreement, all that kind of stuff. So I've seen, properties in the postponement process, 5, 7, 10 years. Let's just say, for instance, 123 Main Street that we talked about is going in, it's been noticed, and I'm the borrower. And then I go, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Bank, because back in 2012, qualified mortgage law put in that, hey, banks are required to do some kind of workout program so we don't have 2007 meltdown all over again, right?
Mm-hmm.
So say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Chase Bank, I just ran into some financial difficulty. You know, here's it is. They'll actually analyze they'll ask for your income, almost like you're reapplying for the loan, and they might say, all right, okay, you owe us $500,000. Why don't we do the loan based on $300,000? And that'll fit you back into your payment model that fits your current income situation. And then we're going to balloon the additional $200,000 at the end of the 30 years or at the end of the 10 years or something like that. So they just modify the agreement to where it fits your current income status. So now that the bank has done that, usually to start a foreclosure process is like, call it $5,000, 1% of the loan, right? Well, Chase Bank doesn't, just because they paid the $5,000 for them to, and the statute for Arizona is I can postpone it, and I can postpone it up to 90 days. So if I'm Chase Bank in that particular scenario, I can postpone it every 90 days. So I only have to take it to have it called at the sale 4 times a year. And it generally only costs me $15 to have the guy stand on the courthouse. Hey, 123 Main Street has been postponed for another 90 days. So it's way cheaper for Chase Bank to just leave it in foreclosure and pay the $15 4 times a year than actually cancel the foreclosure sale and repay the $5,000 to start all over again. And what's also good for them about that is if I'm the guy that got into modification agreement and I miss a payment, guess what happens? They're already in the foreclosure process. The next time it's time to come up and read the notice and I've missed a payment, they go, hey, 123 Main Street's for sale, and they sell it.
Got it. Now, when you're bidding on a property at auction, are you bidding on the property or are you bidding on the liens? And what type of research do you have to do to make sure that you're bidding on a first loan versus a second loan or an HOA loan or an HOA lien or some other type of lien?
All
And
right,
I think this
so
is a big misconception for people.
yeah, because and I actually did a reel about lien position on my Instagram just yesterday, and I ended up with it's probably the biggest views I've ever had. I mean, I'm not one of these big guys. I only got like 5,000 followers, but I ended up with I think 8,000 people that watched my reel, right? And it was just about lien position. I was like, wow. I mean, I think I talk about more interesting stuff than lien position at foreclosure sale, but that one particular reel yesterday was just like, hey, lien position. So you have your first lien position and your second lien position and even your third lien positions, back prior to, were you out there buying houses prior to 2007?
No, I actually started selling real estate in 2010. And
Okay.
in 2007, I was in college, finishing up in college. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I asked, because you're pretty young. So I was just like, but anyway, prior to 2007, you could get a first, you could get a second. If you could fill out a piece of paper, you could get a third, whatever lien position. So let's just talk about the first and the second. So the first, maybe they borrowed 200,000, and the house was worth 250 when they first bought it. Well, just like Phoenix, California, like a lot of places, if you bought 5 years ago, what's your house worth today? Like 400,000, right? So now you have a first lien for 200. You can probably get, a small business bank or something like that to give you your equity out, as long as you got a good. So now you borrow maybe another 100,000 and you have $300,000 in debt on your $400,000 house. Well, if you quit paying on either one of those mortgages has the right to send you to foreclosure. But let's just say you're paying on the $200,000 first, but you decide, your second was a equity line of credit. So 2 years ago, that equity line of credit, when interest rates were 2%, your equity line of credit was probably 3%, right? Your equity line of credit is probably 9% right now because it's an adjustable rate. Well, maybe you can't now afford the 9% mortgage because your payment on that second just tripled, right? So you quit paying on it. Well, that second has the right to take it to sale because you quit paying on it. So they might start the foreclosure process on their $100,000, and banks aren't allowed to make money on the foreclosure process. They're allowed to collect their $100,000, any back payments, any default interest, any late fees, and their attorney's fees to start the foreclosure. So maybe they open up at 115. You're like, wow, that house is going to foreclosure. It's an opening up at 115 and it's worth 400,000. It's like a steal, right? It's best deal on the planet. So you go down to their foreclosure sale and you didn't reach out to your local title company and get a title check done on it. You go down there, all the professional bidders are standing around and watching you jump in this foreclosure sale, and you're like, I'll give it 115,000. And even some of the professional builders might, it's competitive at foreclosure sale. They might bid it, because they know that, hey, the 200's in place. It hasn't been foreclosed on yet, so it's only 200,000. They actually might bid on that 115 to maybe like 120 or 130, right? So the whole debt would be only 330 on the $400,000 house, depending on how competitive, what neighborhood the house is in, and anyway. So it bids to 125. You win the bid. You're just the novice rookie foreclosure guy, and you're jumping up and down. Obviously, maybe you go knock on the door, or maybe they've actually, someone passed away, and you don't even know that the first is in place. Your money's gone. And then next thing you know, you get a notice on your door saying that the first is going to sale. Or you decide to go to refinance it, and the title company goes, all right, well, your refinance is $330,000, and you think you bought the house for 115, right? Or 120. So yeah, you have to check your lien position. If you buy a first lien, everything junior to it gets wiped out. If you buy a second lien, you have to pay everything senior. For HOA liens are typically judicial foreclosures. So back taxes are judicial foreclosures. HOA liens are for judicial foreclosures. So judicial foreclosure is different. So you've heard of mortgage states, obviously, and deed of trust states, right?
Yeah.
A mortgage state means it's a mortgage. So it has to go through a judicial foreclosure, which means it goes to the actual court system, where you and I, Arizona and California, are deed of trust states, where we record a deed of trust, and then when we want to foreclose, we just hire a trustee to foreclose on the property. On the mortgage states, and you kind of can use the Mississippi, if you will, and go everything pretty much east is a mortgage state, and everything pretty much west is a deed of trust state. That's a general rule of thumb. New Mexico is actually a mortgage state. And the problem with mortgage states is there is a redemption period. So New Mexico being one of the worst. So if you were to buy that note at foreclosure sale, the homeowner has 11 months in New Mexico to redeem you. So who wants to go buy a house where on, 10 months and 29 days, the homeowner that might be staying in the property gets some guy to give them a private money loan and write you back your check, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Now, let me ask you this. Like, let's say that you buy a first position loan, right? But then it has, it's the person's behind on their property taxes or owes an HOA lien. Who has to cover that? Is that the new buyer that covers that, or does that stay with the previous occupant?
So it depends on the state. California, I think, is 6 months. Don't quote me on that. So HOAs, so Arizona, they're wiped out. I think California is 6 months. You have to, once you buy the property and you pay for it, the HOA, if he's 3 years behind, can charge you 6 months worth of HOAs. Now, what they've done to help recover that is they make that big transfer fee, right? So they get the transfer fee from you, and then they can get 6 months. I think Vegas is a year, Arizona 0. But property taxes never go away. The state always
Never.
gets their money. Never. And in Arizona, I don't do property tax liens because they're just a way to bid rate down. So what the state does is they start at 16%. And then you can say, hey, 123 Main Street, the property taxes are $7,000. If you go to a tax lien sale, they open it up at $7,000, but they're not taking, you can't actually buy they're just selling that $7,000 note, which the state charges 16%. And then you as the bidder can bid it down. Most people know that the property taxes are actually in front of the bank. So people will bid those down to 4 and 5% because like they're always going to get paid, right? Or they have the option to foreclose on the property.
Yeah. Are there any other liens that stay on the property and don't go away? Like, let's say I bid on a first, besides property taxes and some states HOA liens, anything else that would stay on that just wouldn't go away?
City liens don't go away. So like communities where there's no HOA, or like if you're going to bid on an apartment complex and the apartment complex is pretty run down, what the city will do is put a city lien on it. If there's a bunch of cars on the side, and typically the city doesn't actually do the work. What they do is they put a lien on what they think the work is going to cost. So you can typically go to the city and say, hey, you have this city lien for $18,000. How much of the work did you actually do? Sometimes they've done work, sometimes they haven't. But you can negotiate with the city on how much of that $18,000 city lien you can. If you say, hey, I'll get this all fixed in 30 days, they may be like, all right, give us $10,000.
So the moral of the story is do a title search on the property to know what you're getting yourself into. Know whether you're bidding on a first loan, a second loan, a third loan, and also know what other things are associated. If you're just looking on Foreclosure Radar, if you're just looking on Zillow, there's a very good chance that you could be bidding on the wrong thing and you think that you're getting a smoking deal, and then you have a big, big surprise. The other thing that I appreciated about how you said it, you're like, and us professional bidders may bid up to here. I have heard of stories where professional bidders or investors see like a new guy. They know that they're bidding on a second lien. They might bid against them to get them to bid up higher, and then they drop a second lien on that person just because it is competitive at auction and they look at people as competition. And instead of helping them out, they may say, hey, look, like they may let them bid on something that's not really of anything of value, basically.
Yeah, I was never like that. I know other people would just bid against them just for entertainment and fun sake. It's different though when you're bidding on a property where, like in Phoenix, it's $10,000. I've lost $10,000 checks before, but like when you're actually bidding in California, you have to give all the money. So if the professional bidder, might make a bid or two out of humor or something like that, but they also know that it's opening at 115. There's the 200,000 in front of it. It's a $400,000 house. There's still room to play there. But let's just say it was opening up at 175. They know the 200's there. It's a 400,000. I'm not going to mess with anybody that's, I'm not going to risk like, okay, they bid, they get scared, then I bid against them, and now I pay $375 for a 400. We do it. And people think that like, hey, let's just go down to the foreclosure sale. And they look at, and they're like, oh, they just bid against me so hard. Foreclosure companies are professional investors. They buy lots of properties. They have teams of rehabbers. They understand the market probably as well as anybody, because these people aren't getting the 10-day inspection. They aren't getting a walkthrough. They aren't getting any of this stuff. They know the lien. They're at the riskiest place to buy as far as title goes. They're professional real estate people. They may be down there in their flip flops and their shorts and their t-shirts,
but they know what they're doing.
They know what they're doing. Don't take just because they're not dressed as nice as you. Don't think they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing.
Now, how often should somebody be checking title? Like, let's say that they checked title yesterday at 2 o'clock, foreclosures tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Could
Yeah.
something be placed on within that 24 hours?
No, it's just titles run, and the trustee runs the title and does what's called a trustee sale guarantee. And they're supposed to notice everybody that's has a lien position so like if the first going, he has to notice the second, he has to notice the HOA. So that's the responsibility of the trustee. One other small thing that we haven't talked about is IRS liens. If Mr. and Mrs. Smith, for instance, have an IRS lien, the ability to find out if it's Mr. and Mrs. Smith or that Mr. and Mrs. Smith is almost impossible. An IRS lien is going to cloud your title for 120 days. So if you see an IRS, you do run your title and they're like an IRS lien, there is a possibility that you will, and I know the markets move quickly, especially, recently, you're not going to be able to buy it today and then sell it for 120 days. The lien automatically drops off, but the IRS has the option to come back and write you the money for the check or for the house. And I've done, I don't know, north of, I don't even know, 12,000 foreclosures. Never happened to me. I actually, in all the years of my foreclosure business, 23 years in the foreclosure business, I've known it happen one time on a very large commercial building in Tucson, Arizona.
Yeah. So the part I didn't understand, Chris, is the part about the last minute liens on a property. For some reason, I was under the impression that you had to continue to recheck title until the actual foreclosure date, and that something could be placed on the property like last minute. And if you didn't do your title search, that basically you could get stuck with that. I may be incorrect, but that was like kind of like for some reason that was my impression of it.
Well, I won't run a lien check out 30 days, but like I typically run the lien checks the day before. Nothing's going to change in that lien process. I mean, no one's going to be letting them borrow more money or, as long as your concern is that first lien position that you're bidding on. Yeah. And then you see that, the deed of trust number, originated in 2018. So anything that's newly recorded is going to be recorded like down here, right? Maybe 2023. But that lien position in 2018 that you're going to bid on is going to wipe everything junior to it out. So if there is a new lien,
IRS, unless
yeah,
it's unless it's
yeah,
the ones that we talked about, basically.
yeah. So property taxes, they only do their stuff once a year, so that's not going to pop up, right? If it's a city lien, the city might have popped a lien on there, but once again, go down and negotiate. That means it's a new lien. Like if it popped up in the last day or two, they just drove by the property and said, "Hey, the car on blocks, please remove it." And if you don't remove it, we're going to remove it for $3,000 or something like that. And they'll pop a lien on the property. But if you go down to the city and say, "Hey, I just bought the house, I'm going to remove it," they'll like, "Great, do it in the next 30 days. We'll drop the lien off."
Got it. So how does the process of buying properties at auction somewhat differ from buying traditionally? Like, okay, we know that you've got to do your own title search. What else is different about it?
Well, you don't have access to the property if they're living there, right? I mean, you can knock on the door. Um, you know, people are a little bit scared to knock on the door. Actually, I hate to say it, but like I said, 23 years in the business, and I actually, literally 120 days ago, someone knocked on the door and ended up running into the wrong guy on the wrong day, and is no longer with us. So,
Wow.
For years and years and years, I used to say, they're just people. They got in financial trouble. Like, I was never afraid. I just, I'm a taller guy. I'm 6'7". I just knock on the door like, "Hey, what's going on?" But, yeah.
That's crazy.
But 120 days ago in Phoenix, Arizona, like I used to say, "Don't worry about knocking on the door. They're people." But 23 years in the business, someone just, had a bad
Passed
day.
away,
So,
basically.
yeah.
Now, let me ask you this. I've heard about this as well, too, that somebody went to auction. They drove by the property a week ago. they bid on a property, and then in that week that they weren't at auction, the house burned down. Has
It's
that ever
happened.
happened to you? Have you ever
Yeah.
heard of that?
So I wasn't actually the buyer on the house because I drive everything the morning of. I don't care if I drove it 5 days ago. I drive it again today, because some stuff might only postpone for 5 days, right? So, but someone came to me for a hard money loan but I'm an auction bidder too. So they went and bid on the property, and I didn't attend that particular auction because I knew it burnt down, right? I'm not going to go, I didn't want to bid on the house. So anyway, someone bid on the house. They called me in, like, because I'm a hard money lender too, that, finances foreclosures. And they're like, hey, Chris, can I borrow the money one on this? And I'm just like pulling up my prop report, and I'm just like, did you know that burned down last night or 2 nights ago or whatever? It's like, I'm like, did you drive it today? And they're like, no, I drove it last week when it was supposed to go to sale. I'm like, did you drive it today? Because it's burnt. It's like the roof's gone. And so, but the good thing about Arizona, you just lose your $10,000 cashier's check. It's not like California where you got to put it, or Vegas. Vegas is the same way, where you got to put it all up in when you bid on it.
Imagine
So
that. Imagine that you're bidding at auction. You bid $400,000, and now the house is burned down. Um, and if that happens and it's 400,000, you pretty much lost the 400,000, right? Now you just have the
well,
value of the land.
yeah, the land, or you could, I used to buy burnt out, so it's kind of a lucrative deal. Like, you're not starting with everything. You just obviously got to get your plan. You got to go get the as built on it, and then you can you get a truss package, get the same truss package on it. You're going to rip off the roof. You're going to be. I mean, obviously, most of the electrical went through the roof, so you're redoing electrical. But the plumbing in the ground is probably all still good, and you got your concrete at least, and you got some exterior walls, so it's not as terrible. But obviously, definitely not a good
And
deal.
is that a pretty good rule of thumb, to drive by the property the morning of?
Yes, I
Yeah.
100% the morning of.
Morning of. And that's something that
Yeah.
you don't basically deviate from. That happens every single time.
Every single time.
What other things? All right, so we've done a title search on the property. We've basically drove by the property the morning of. We've seen to make sure that it's still up for auction. What are the things should people be doing in preparation? I've got the money already in cashier's check. Anything else that I should be doing as I prepare for the actual date?
Yeah, so you've ran your title check, you've drove by the property, you have your cashier's check, you're ready to bid. I mean, obviously doing your exit strategy. So you've comped the property, obviously, and know what you're going to exit at. Generally, when you're doing a full remodel, you're going to get top dollars. So you can generally pick, the comp that has, and then understanding, like, doing your research on what the property looks like. I always go and look, like, if there been any canceled listings. Maybe they had it listed 6 months ago, or an expired listing. Because and I'm sure this is true in your areas. There's certain parts of town where the houses are built in the 50s or 60s. But if someone actually took the time in, like, that last 10 years to, like, fully update it, and it looks nice and pretty inside, even though it's an older neighborhood with, like, all the white picket fences and the pretty grass, and they're 1960 homes, but a 1960 home original and a 1960 home that actually someone took the time to put the 200,000 in is a completely different comp, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, doing your, like, trying to figure out what you can do. Like I said, I used to say, like, knock on the door, peek inside, but
Up until recently that happened,
yeah,
where now what are some of the, like, meaning, like, when you're peeking inside, if they don't allow you to see, maybe you can just kind of see what the exterior condition of it. Besides the house burning down, could the current occupants cause any additional damage? Like, I heard when foreclosures were really bad that people would pour cement down the toilet. Have you ever
yeah.
had any stories like that?
I haven't had the cement story. You definitely have people that have spray painted the walls, stole the appliances on the way out, stole the AC condensers on the way out. I mean, stuff like that. I mean, but it's just, you just budget into, the
Your
system,
bid.
like your bid. So, but and then obviously you have your vacant homes, you have your occupied homes, and then you have your vacant homes, right? So on your vacant homes, I do what I can to, I'll reach over the fence, walk through the back gate. Usually those glass doors on the back aren't always closed off. You can see in the back. You're trying to see the kitchen, but yeah, if they're vacant, I check all the doors. And the easiest way to know if it's vacant is walk up to the hose bib and turn the water on. Because if the water's off, they don't live there. If the water's on, they might probably still live there. But that's the quickest and easiest way. Just go turn on the hose bib and turn the water on, and you'll find out real quick. Yeah, probably there. I mean, you can leave it. You can live without power. It's hard to live without water.
Yeah. What about financing? Like, I know that you said that from time to time in Arizona, you do some hard money loans. Can somebody buy a property at auction with financing in California, or do they have? Is there any way to finance a property at auction? In other words,
I don't know. I don't know if I know there's a bunch of money lenders that do foreclosure sales. I actually think
uh-huh.
there's some in some of the counties. There are actually hard money lenders at the sale that if you get set up with them, they will actually, pay for the house for you right there. I
Mhm.
just don't. I don't know them. If you are using
Personally,
your own cash, yeah, you would just have to use your own cash, and then as soon as the trustee's deed comes in, you refinance it.
got it. What's
But there
been
are some counties where there are hard money lenders at the sale. So
So let's say that the property closes now, and let's say that there is the occupant there now. How do you guys typically handle that? Do you guys offer cash for keys to their current occupant to move out, or do you guys
yeah,
go through the foreclosure process?
I do both. I start the foreclosure. I start the eviction as like a security blanket because I mean we've all heard have you heard this frame or term buyers are liars type of thing?
Yeah.
In the real estate business. So
Mhm.
you've heard that term, right? Well, people are getting evicted are liars too. So yeah, I'll move out next week. It's better just for me. I send the notice. It's with the attorney. I start the process. In Phoenix, it's a little easier than it is in California, but it's still probably a 60-day process. I think you guys are closer from the guys I talked to, like to 120 or 150 days.
Mhm.
Um, so, I just start the process now because I can always cancel it. I can always like, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, can I give you cash for keys? They're like, great. We need to find somewhere to go. We'll be out in 30 days. I'm like, great. Sign the signature for cash for keys. I will be here in 30 days to make sure it's broom swept and everything's gone. And I'm happy to give you a cashier's check for our agreed upon amount and have a nice day. Because obviously, especially in California, like, having half a million, 700,000, $1 million tied up is worth
Expensive.
3 or 4 grand. It's expensive, yeah. Whether you got your money in the house or like even or if you're borrowing hard money at 10 to 12%, I mean, on 700 grand, you're paying 7 grand a month.
Yeah. What's a rule of thumb as to how much to offer in terms of cash for keys? And for our viewers that don't know what cash for keys is, you're basically, instead of going the eviction route, you're basically saying, hey, look, I'll give you X amount of dollars if you move out by this state, basically.
Yeah, I'm. It's just I just kind of pencil it off in my head. It's like, all right, it's going to take me. It's a $300,000 house. It's going to take me,
Mhm.
through the court system. It's going to take me 2 months. That's $3,000 a month if I'm paying like 12%. So that's 6 grand. So it's not does me no good to offer them more than 6 grand. But if I can save myself some money, if I can offer them half that, if I can offer them 3 grand. Now, if it's $1 million house on 60 days, it's going to cost me 20 grand, right? So maybe giving them
Then it
8,
makes a
9,
big difference.
10 grand, So I kind of just do it that way. What's it going to cost me for them to stay there? And then,
Yeah.
I'm not going to pay them more than it's going to cost me to just evict them because then they actually get a judgment on them. And every now and then you get a call back and like, hey, Chris, you have this judgment on me. I'm like, yeah, give me 20%, give me 20 cents on the dollar. I'll release it.
Yeah. What about like in California? I know that a lot of the laws are more tenant friendly than they are in a lot of other states. Like, can a tenant actually say, hey, look, I'm not moving out? And can they get that date extended instead of 60, 90 days? Could they hire an attorney and make it 120, 6 months, or even a year? And has that ever happened to you? Or have you had any friends where the tenant maybe hires an attorney and then they extend the eviction date on
Yeah.
purpose?
So the because it's a foreclosure sale, I mean, um, we in Arizona, we basically they have just like a 90-day. That's kind of their. If it's a like so, if it's the homeowner, it's like boom, boom, boom. You can probably get it done in 60 days. If it's a tenant, Arizona's pretty much like, all right, we'll give you 90 days to move. So on a tenant, it's pretty much a 90-day, maybe 120-day rule. The only thing that I know that they can do to like just really mess with you is file bankruptcy. And if they file bankruptcy, it could be a year. Yeah.
So that basically freezes all assets, basically, even the
Yes.
current.
Yeah. It
And some
just like,
people,
yeah, you
and
just
then
got to wait till the whole bankruptcy process goes through.
there's no way to evict somebody if they're in a bankruptcy proceeding.
Nope. Not until you get you can go get a separate attorney to have your attorney that it's called lifting the stay on that one asset. And, it's easy to do if, like they don't live there, like it's a vacant house. It's like, hey, I bought this, even if they're in a bankruptcy and you find out they're in a bankruptcy and you just bought the house at foreclosure. Now, that would have been a bankruptcy post foreclosure because if it was pre foreclosure, it would just postpone the sale. But sometimes you find out you bought the house. So in Arizona, we actually have that put the 10 grand up today and you pay for the next day. So every now and then you get that window or you have, or you're in the process of evicting them and they file bankruptcy post foreclosure, which obviously is a terrible time to file a bankruptcy because if you would have filed it before the foreclosure, it would have just pushed the foreclosure down the road. But every now and then you get that rare case where the house is foreclosed and they're in there and you're in the middle of the eviction and they file bankruptcy. And now you just have to wait. And then you can hire an attorney to be like, hey, I bought this house in foreclosure. They have these other assets, maybe some business assets over here. But hey, I bought this house in the foreclosure. Can we at least lift the stay on this particular house?
Can a tenant file for bankruptcy and it also freezes that asset even if they're not the owner, or is that only
Yep.
for owners? They can. That's crazy.
They can. Tenants can file
That's
bankruptcy.
crazy.
I've only had that happen once, and I'm like, are you kidding? The tenant's in a financial struggle on top of I got the house in foreclosure, and I think I had to wait like 6 months to finally get them out. And this is back when pre-COVID and all this stuff. Like we're behind in Arizona for our eviction process, but because the court systems are a little bit behind because there was the foreclosure moratorium and the eviction moratorium and all that stuff that went in with COVID. When the bank systems in Arizona are good, it is a 5-day notice. It is a 5-day to a court date and a 5-day to sheriff. It's 21 days. It's like boom, 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 you're out. But it's not because that our laws are tenant friendly. It's because our court systems are backed up.
How do the opening bids get determined?
I don't know. It's just it's the bank's balance sheet that day. Honestly, I'm
Really?
literally, back in 2007 or 8, it would be like, here's a house in, this town called Surprise, 1,923 homes, both by Bank of America. And you can do banks can do different kind of bids. One's called a full debt. That's everything they're owed, all their back fees, their lawyer fees, everything. Here's this one house going on the same sale that this one house over here is going. This one's opening up at $100,000. This one's opening up at $325,000. Both Bank of America. It's no rhyme or reason to it. No idea.
Yeah, I always wondered. Okay, so obviously the point of me wanting to make this video is people imagine a lot of times it's really easy to go out and bid at auctions, but I would say that bidding at auction is for the highest, most sophisticated type of investors because yes, you can get big rewards, but there's also big risk associated with bidding at auction. So
The funny thing is that's everybody's misconception. It is generally the most expensive place to buy. So if you are a dispo guy or whatever, and you want to go find the people that'll pay the most money for properties, start with the foreclosure guys. Because the foreclosure auction is a public auction. It's going to sale. You know what the bid is. It's public information. Going to the dinner table and negotiating with Mr. and Mrs. Seller and listening to their pain points and all that, you can get a way better deal doing that than you can get at the auction.
why do you say that those guys pay the most? Is it
Because
because they have so much risk and they've had so many different situations already happen to them, or
no, it's just they're professional companies. They need to buy so many properties. They know what they're doing. It's just they're just good. They're the highest level of people doing the business, and they're not going to just let Mr. and Mrs. Smith walk down there and bid against them and get a property. They're gonna like push them up a little bit, but they're not gonna. I would say at Phoenix, Arizona, houses sell at 80 cents on the dollar religiously
at auction?
Like at auction. I'm a wholesaler. If I'm knocking on Mr. and Mrs. door, I'm offering them 70. I'm not offering them 80, and they'll take 70.
So here's what I was going to tell you, Chris, is now that we've let our viewers know the risk, give us your biggest win at auction. Just give us a win.
I bought one in Scottsdale. It was worth $1 million. I paid like $256 for it. But it had that IRS lien. So I'm like, this is the time. I'm going to see it happen. IRS is going to come pay me back. And so when the IRS comes and pays you, they'll give you your $256, but they're not giving you any rehab money, right? So I'm just like, all right, I'll just let it sit here for the whole 120 days because this is like in 2003. I was newer in the business. And I sat there and day 120 days. And like, they never contacted me. I guess I get the $1 million house for $256,000. So
That's
I just happened.
Crazy.
So I was bidding on the second, quote unquote second, but I knew who the first was, and I was able to get in contact with him, and I knew it had been released, and nobody else knew that but me. So everybody else thought I did the homework. I had an inside scoop. So, so I knew that it was a private person that had the loan, and I knew who the private person was, and they had been paid off. But they hadn't released the deed of trust. So I called them and they're like, yeah, no, that's paid off. I'm like, oh, would you give me a release if I go buy this thing? And they're like, yeah, just come over by, it was just a private money lender. He's like, yeah, just come by the office. I'll sign it for you.
So everybody thought that maybe you weren't bidding on such a great asset, but because you had that inside information, you did extra homework, you were able to capitalize on a great deal. Now, what about like your biggest loss or at an auction? Like what does that look like?
My biggest loss at auction. Once again, so I want to say it's, this is, you can ask, I use Fidelity Title. They're one of the biggest title companies, but the people checking title are just people. You're not getting title insurance and you're asking a title company to check title for you. So I go bid on they're like, oh yeah, it's a first deed of trust. Great. I bid on it. I buy it. Come down the road. There was a deed of trust that they missed on the title thing. And it was like $120,000. And I actually wholesale it to somebody else. But I'm a wholesaler. We do 30 to 40 houses a month in Phoenix. I can't stick somebody with, that kind of deal. So I had to write a check for $120,000.
Damn. That's crazy. So big rewards, big risk.
And that wasn't even my fault. Like I did what I was supposed to do, but like the person at Fidelity Title is just a human being. Like if they miss something, there's just, And it's not like you're asking them to do that as a favor. So if it's human error and it's just no title insurance, it's just like, oops, sorry.
It's funny because I had a title rep recently research one of my properties because I was getting a second lien on it, and they totally missed the first on the title search. And I call them back. I'm like, I'm pretty confident I have a first. They're like, we have no idea how this happened. Please apologize to us. But I caught it. So it could happen. There is human error. So what advice would you give to somebody looking to get into buying houses at auction? And any final words?
I mean, if you want to go buy at auction, you have that one particular house that you like, you've been following, you want to go down there and bid on it, understand pulling your lien position and all that. If you want to just like, I mean, I don't see the foreclosure, like everybody's like the wave of foreclosures it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Everybody has equity. Every one of us pre-foreclosure guys are going to call them, text them, door knock them. Like, we're not letting the $200,000 house that's worth 500 get to the sale unless they're passed away. It's probably not getting there. Like, or unless they are in a divorce situation, they hate each other so much that they're just like, screw it, I'm just going to let it go just to, piss the other person off. Right. But I mean, if there's equity, it's not like it's, I was making a joke earlier, like in 2007, you could call the bank and say, hey, I want a second mortgage. They'd be like, great, we'll DocuSign this stuff to you and we'll wire you the money. It was like that. Like you could have all your, and they would give you to 105% of your equity in a day. And that's why the whole financial crisis happened. But like banks aren't giving out second loans like they used to. So everybody's going to get door knocked, called,
everything. Cool.
Yeah.
Chris, I have enjoyed this interview so much. I think that you are one of the most knowledgeable people, at least as it relates to this topic. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing this with us. If somebody wanted to be maybe mentored by you or wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. So it's just Chris Eymann on either Facebook or Instagram. You can find me. It's Eymann. It's one of the very unique names. I'm not hard to find.
I love it. I love it. So I want to say thank you again, Chris, for taking the time to come on the show. For all of our viewers out there, thank you so much for watching this episode. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you feel that this episode would be helpful to a friend, family, neighbor, anybody else, make sure to hit that share button. So once again, thank you so much, Chris, and until next time.
Yeah, thanks again.